welcome to Hekate's Crossing as we continue the exploration of the universal heart. Okay, open to self-love. No one is more deserving of love than you are. No one is less deserving either. Selfishness and self-absorption reflect too little self-love rather than too much. Cultivating an attitude towards yourself that is affectionate, respectful, hopeful, and encouraging leads you away from self-absorption. It gives you the courage and the confidence to believe that your presence is positive and to find that you connect with other people through ways of behaving that will feel good to them and to you also. The greatest impediment to love may not be the inexplicable or even the hurtful things that other people do. It may be our own unwillingness to accept and embrace our contradictions. We often swing between seeing ourselves as all good or all bad, as hopeless or marvelous. We take directions from what we interpret as other people's reactions to us. Our mood swings with those opinions, accepting our own complexity and the contradictions that express it, accepting how shifting and various our own feelings and reactions are. It becomes possible to see how that complexity is also reflected in other people, and inevitably in social relations too. We become safe from the inside out only when we dare know ourselves in our entirety. Limiting self-knowledge and self-acceptance in our entirety. Limiting self-knowledge and self-acceptance, making it conditional upon a tight range of correct responses or behaviors, keeps us small and separate. It does not reflect truthfully who we are or how within each of us fire and water live side by side. We are our contradictions. We are our longings for connection. This dazzling goddess verse survives from ancient Egypt to remind us there is no need to fear that. I am knowledge, I am ignorance, I am shame, I am boldness, I am shameless and ashamed, I am strength, I am fear. Give heed to me, I am the one who is disgraced and the great one. Reflecting on how hard won a little self-love is, or a few realistic moments of self-forgiveness, it is good to remember the universality and inclusiveness of love, that love itself is profoundly generous. We may live our pinched versions of it. We may cheapen it, trade it, make it ugly. We may betray it and ourselves. But love does much better than survive. Love is not a prize for winners only, nor is it a wrathful judge that we must placate. Love is an attitude of mind that is expressed as powerfully through what and how we think as it is through our emotions. Thinking about love can take us back home again to the experience of love. There are many times when we will behave unlovingly, however noble our intentions are. We can accept the reality of that without being crushed by it. To return to the ease of thinking the best of other people and accepting ourselves, we have only to wake ourselves up, discover again how instantly available love is to us, and how unfailingly we can trust it. I say to myself, be honest when I start getting into routines of blaming other people or mouthing off about them, says Stella. She's a 25-year-old marketing assistant, A-grade netball player, and active in local politics. She was raised by two sight-disabled parents and learnt early on that she could rise above other people's curiosity, pity, and even rudeness. Be honest has become a kind of mantra to me, Stella continues. It's shorthand for all sorts of things like look at the big picture and you'll get over this, and even aren't you feeling rather sorry for yourself? You're going to find it hard to believe, but all through my childhood, if anything was wrong, both my parents would say, look on the bright side, Stella. There was a period when I was about 14, when I wanted to puke if they said that. They were blind. They couldn't see at all. Then once when one of them said that and I started to yell and go on, I saw a look of such grief on my mother's face. It was only there for a moment, but absolutely shook me to my core. In an instant I heard that phrase differently. I heard it as a kind of brave statement, not stupid at all. My mother is very brave, so is Dad. They are wonderful people. But it was that flash of vulnerability that Mum couldn't hide that actually showed me up to myself. Talking to you now, I could say that was the first moment of raw honesty I ever experienced. And I remember it with the same kind of hit of heat that I remember my first kiss or the first time I had sex. It was that intense. I don't know if that's where my mantra came from, but anyway, I do value honesty, and so do my parents, and the mantra itself stands me in great stead. With several more decades of life experience, Neil says something quite similar to Stella about how his concern for other people also led him to greater insight and the self-love and respect that accompany that. I wanted to see myself as a good provider, Neil says. That was what mattered most to my own father, and I knew how I'd be benefited from it. In my 18th year of marriage, with 3 great boys still at high school, I lost my job. It didn't only happen to me. I was definitely part of that odious trend called slash and burn. Each person slashed and burned was a human being. We forget that. I went right down. I applied for jobs, didn't get them, hated myself, hated the world. My wife's psychiatric nurse. My wife's a psychiatric nurse, and she did more and more shifts, but the pay stinks, even if you go in 60 hours a week. To cut a long story short, I'd have a kind of a breakdown for several months. I'd only leave the house if I had to do something with the kids. Otherwise, I was stuck inside the house with my own thoughts. In the end, Tracy, Neil's wife, forced me to see our doctor and get onto some antidepressant medication. Then, still with some pressure from her, I started volunteering. Through that, I met up with a bloke in a similar position to mine, and after a few months, we brought a small business together. We deliver milk to small outlets, corner shops, and the like. It's totally different from the executive life and a lot freer. But as well as that, I had to get down to the absolute basics. Could the kids still experience how much I love them? Was I willing to be the best friend and husband to Tracy? Could I let the employers, who had probably forgotten my name by now, rule my future? How did I want to see myself? For sure, I didn't want to see myself as a has-been. I wanted to see myself as a survivor, and as a good husband and father. Those are far more inclusive terms than good provider was. I had to make the leap. I'm not a deep thinker. I would never have gone beyond good provider if I hadn't had to. This doesn't mean that I'm glad about what happened, because I'm not. The whole thing was handled extremely badly. I'm still angry about that. It took its toll on all of us, but at least I myself eventually turned the tide. That's nothing I could put on my CV. It's nothing that will get me back to the money and prestige I had before. It's made a bloody great difference to our lives, though, and sometimes when I think about it, I feel invulnerable. Okay? Extend your capacity to love. Fear can stand powerfully in the way of trusting and experiencing love. Fear may tell us that we are not worthy of love, or that the risks of reaching towards love are far too dangerous. Fear may also tell us that wanting love makes us dangerously vulnerable, particularly if we believe that sexual love is our primary source of comfort, and yet are confused about whether that is what we really want. Agonies of self-doubt and confusion about what love is are felt by people of all ages. This has nothing to do with intelligence, awareness, or life experience. The paradox remains: love can strengthen us and also show us how vulnerable we are. I know that for many years I wasn't comforted by my own ideas about love. On the contrary, my concerns with love aroused some of the most uncomfortable internal struggles. Love was something I was confident I'd had as a young child, and I recognized that love was something I wanted to give as well as receive. But my mother had died at 38 when I was 8. That was confusing as well as shattering. It tangled love with loss and made love seem dangerous. Alongside that, though my mother lived in my memory as someone who was loving, I wanted to be like her. I wanted to see myself as a loving person, yet I wasn't sure what that was. Love was certainly confused in my mind with being admired and validated, and the meeting of those needs was certainly confused with sex and my own sexual attractiveness. With good reason, I was nervous and uncertain about what other people were asking for in the name of love. What made things worse with it was that I was mistrustful of my own rights to draw boundaries. Defining my needs and treating myself well as a matter of course were the most mysterious parts of this uncomfortable equation. Friendship was the easiest part. Some of my worst misjudgments occurred because I was afraid of hurting someone's feelings, or being seen to be unkind or selfish. Now I know that such loss of self and such potential loss of safety is not what love asks. In thinking about love, you don't abandon yourself or leave yourself out. Love excludes no one. Love comes to life only when you're able to consider other people alongside yourself and yourself alongside other people. My sense of myself as a consistently loving person did not come fully to life until I was in my mid-30s, almost at the age at which my own mother had died. Within the space of a little more than a year, I gave birth to my 2 children. Their existence brought me many things, among the most precious, this essential reassurance that I could embrace the risks of loving unreservedly. This doesn't mean that I haven't loved before. That I had, but I'd thought about love principally in relation to adult partners, in specific relationships, and generally in high circumscribed ways. The precious experience of surrendering to love that came with the children and was deepened through the work I was doing, as well as my spiritual practice, gradually changed my experience of love itself. From those early years of motherhood, I slowly realized that what I had feared most was that despite several significant and sustaining love affairs, I was not capable of truly loving. Only when that danger was behind me could I slowly uncover how love had, in my perception of it, become a guarded individual experience, and a seasonal one at that. You had it, or you didn't have it. It came, it went. Like a child randomly putting the tail on the donkey, I assigned and limited my capacity to love, focusing my longing for love on specific individuals who were probably as confused about love as I was. I had not understood how freely love could be given, and how essential it is that love is given freely. Even the God of my childhood kept track of misdemeanors and threatened, bullied, and sorted sheep from goats. What a tragedy exists right there, that human beings could have turned the source and essence of love into a petty, judgmental tyrant, and that for many people this perception of the divine remains stuck, replaying that same tale of fear, punishment, and imminent abandonment. Recognizing how this image of God has been sustained for thousands of years, and how it's mirrored in our own human dramas, it becomes much less surprising that we would learn to see our own faults in technicolor and live in fear of other people's judgments of being found out, rather than easily opening to the infinite delight, acceptance, humor, and goodwill that flow in the presence of love. How exhilarating it is then to discover that whatever difficulties and impediments have been put in the way of your becoming a generously loving person, doesn't take much more to come back to love than a willingness to remember what really matters. Here's an example. You arrive home tired at the end of a long and frustrating day. 3 school backpacks are dumped by the door along with shoes, a hockey stick, and a pile of sweatshirts. The dogs have not been fed. Your daughters are playing different music loudly in their rooms. Your son is on the phone. Your head is throbbing. You begin to unpack the mountain of groceries you've lugged in alone from the car, slamming things into the cupboards and the fridge. Suddenly your son is standing beside you. Through some miracle of unrequested grace, you look at him before you complain. Looking into his eyes, you see someone who is infinitely precious. You recognize him freshly. Your anger goes. Love takes its place, quite unexpectedly. You feel tremendous gratitude that you have food for your children, that you and all your home and safe, and that you have a house to live in. That these fine young people who a moment ago were yet another irritation are in fact people you know intimately. What connects you most deeply is love. With a single intake of breath, everything looks and feels different. You are living love. Another example. It may be your adult brother you resent. He has been rude and selfish for years. Your elderly parents are in despair about him also. The man's a pig. None of you like his wife. She's Mrs. Pig. Then suddenly your brother has 3 weeks to live. You might hear this news with complete indifference. Far more likely, though, you are flooded with desire to make the best of the time that remains, to set your busy life to one side, to do what you can for his comfort, to come to some kind of peace with him, to mend bridges with his wife, to give him the feeling that however difficult your relationship has been, he will leave this life as a man loved by the family of his birth as well as by his wife. This change of events doesn't mean that harsh things didn't happen. It may not even mean that you're able fully to forgive him. But those divisive hurts take their place alongside a renewed feeling of connection. Aware of how brief your brother's life is and how brief all our lives are, you set aside enough of the old anger and resentment to allow love or concern or mercy to be present. You too are living love. Express care and respect in all your relationships. Your efforts to express love, live it, understand it, or even to describe it. It may always be partial, involving, and clumsy. That's how we are. But there's no mistaking the energy and expansiveness you get when love moves through you, brings you into closer contact with other people, and returns to you yourself. Loving generously, we slowly disentangle love from need. We slowly shift our focus from whether we are loved or loved well enough to how we love. In an age where increasing numbers of people spend part or all of their adult lives without a sexual partner, we find it is entirely possible to experience ourselves as a loving person, whether or not we have a conventionally intimate relationship. There's freedom in this too. No need exists for us to leave our feeling selves lying around on a metaphorical stone slab until a frog prince or princess happens by to awaken our dormant capacities for love. No need exists either to put sexual love on such a pedestal that we overlook all other opportunities to be known, cherished, laughed with, appreciated, and comforted. Please know that I'm not denying the preciousness of a committed sexual relationship or the wild forgetfulness of self that sexual love can bring. But there is something precious about other versions of love also, friendships that survive the passing of time, people who inspire each other for an honourable cause, people who create works of art together, people in an extended family who come to know each other as independent adults, people of different generations who share common values or interests, celibate people who live alongside each other in situations of companionship and devotion. The values of these stories of love can easily be overlooked. Preparing to write this book, talking to all kinds of people about all kinds of relationships, time and again I would come up against the remark, but I'm not in a relationship. By that the person meant invariably that they were not in a sexually intimate relationship, just as invariably though they were in relationships with family members, friends, work, colleagues, old schoolmates, and past lovers. And once they began to think seriously about those relationships as relationships and to value them as places for self-discovery as well as comfort, insight, warmth, and loyalty, they inevitably had every bit as much to say about relationships as anyone else. I particularly remember Harry, a highly charged, inspirational man in his mid-30s, who has spent most of his adult life in remote areas of Thailand. Our first hour together was spent with him attempting to sell me the idea that he had nothing to say of use, because so far his love affairs had been so as fleeting as they were intense. The more Harry talked about why he had no experiences worth sharing, the more convinced I was that far from him wasting my time. Hearing his vivid stories of involvement in village people's lives was itself a stimulating experience of connection. Harry's ideas about love were far more restricted than his actual experiences. I loved those couple of hundred people I mainly lived with, he said, towards the end of our time together. I was a little weird to them, I've no doubt, but I think they saw me as someone who was close to their hopes and dreams. They trusted me, that was a big thing. And friends here too, who kept me in touch with home, sent me books, called me back at great expense when I rang them, and said I needed to speak English for a bit, reminded me who I am. There was a lot of care in that too. Then as he was about to leave, Harry sat down again. There is also something else that happens when people are far from home. Maybe it's even why people leave home. The places where I worked were way off the tourist beat, but of course some people would show up where I was for various odd reasons. And I discovered what amazingly deep talks you could have when time was finite or fleeting, were fleeing. Friends who are mediocres and who worked with the terminally ill speak about this too. Or medicers and who worked with the terminally ill speak about this too. There's an absence of normal constraints. I sat up late many times hearing men as well as women talk about the most personal things, reliving it as they were talking, and letting me feel that I had come close to that person in a real way. I used to think they were telling me things because they would probably never see me again, or I was telling them things for the same reason. That's only partly it. It's also that in situations of extremity when people are most justifiably see themselves as strangers to one another, that's actually far more likely to let down their guard and bare their souls. Okay, that's it from me. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Oh, by the way, this is the common thread tarot by Hand Me That Pencil. These are just for major arcana. Okay, so that's it from me. Take care and blessed be.